Sometimes I don't want to know too much because I want to ask the questions that I think. Hi, welcome to the Coaching Game. I'm Laurie Lawson, and tonight my guest is Chris Kogler. Did I say your name right?
Yes, you did, Laurie.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. Thank
A
you.
lot of practice. We got it. And Chris is the CEO of some fantastic thing that I just heard about, and I'm so thrilled I did, called Narrative IQ. And we're going to just bug him and ask him all the questions about that. First, let me just tell you a bit about the Coaching Game. The Coaching Game is based on the fantastic Points of View, the Coaching Game, which is a marvelous coaching tool designed to bring right and left brain thinking together. And they do that through a series of different things, but there are cards also. And I asked my guests to choose a couple cards, and Chris chose two, leadership and creativity. We're going to find out how those two come together, because a lot of times leadership is not considered to be creative at all. But Chris has a whole different idea about that. So Chris, welcome to the Coaching Game.
Thank you so much, Laurie.
Thrilled
It's
to have you
fantastic
here.
to be here. I'm
Yeah,
really
it's
pleased
so
to be here.
exciting. Tell me, what is narrative IQ? How did you come up with it? What is it? Where are you going with it? The whole
Great
thing.
idea. Well, Narrative IQ is a really unique business. It is a management consulting firm, and we work in a very specific niche. We work in the niche of business story strategists. That's what we do. And people say, what is a business story strategist?
Exactly.
You know, what is a business story strategist? What we do is we help leaders in companies, both large and small, to be able to take their strategy, their new initiatives, to take change management initiatives as well as sales, and to put that information, that business information, embedded into a personal business story. By doing that, what we're actually accomplishing is getting folks, the stakeholders who actually are the people listening, to actually remember what they're saying. Stories are very powerful. They're one of the most powerful persuaders we have in the world.
Still, is this a new thought, or is this like an old-time, century-old proven theory that, okay, if you can put it in a story? Well, I know, like if a song, I can remember stuff in a song better than I
Yeah,
can, you know,
yeah.
if it has words. You know, instrumental, it's a nice tune, but I don't remember that. So is this something you came up with, or is this something you've realized, or how did this all happen?
How did this occur? I will give you a little bit of history. Narrative IQ is a relatively young company. However, we're partners, international partners, with a firm by the name of Anecdote.
Okay.
Anecdote has been around for a decade. They're out of Melbourne, Australia. We have 27 partners in 17 countries around the world.
Wow.
So I'm one of two partners in the U.S. Now, as far as stories go, one of the founders had been working for IBM, and when Lou Gerstner was taking IBM from a products company to a services company, this gentleman, whose name is Sean Callahan, was on the team that went literally around the world for about a year and a half collecting IBM business stories, the good, the bad, the ugly. And what they did was, when you collect stories, we call that story listening, they brought it back to the leadership, and based on what they discovered, they found that it was really important to turn the big IBM ship from a products firm to a services firm. Once that,
Wow.
that's pretty neat, isn't it?
Based on stories.
Based
That's
on
amazing.
stories, based on what they were discovering out in the
Yeah.
field. Sean took it a step further. He said, there is a real business here. Stories are very powerful. They're powerful persuaders. And I think that we can take this and not just do story listening, but teach people how to do storytelling, as well as something that we talk about, which is called story triggering, too.
Okay.
Now, the long-term history of stories, human beings are storytellers. That's what we do. We have been storytellers for millennia. When we were cave people, we actually, and you were a leader of your tribe, you needed to tell your tribe that saber-toothed tiger over there was dangerous. And we did this verbally as well as through pictures. If you look at the caves of Lascaux, you can see that stories are on the wall. Now, the fascinating thing is that most people don't really think of themselves as storytellers. However, research was done by a gentleman by the name of Robin Dunbar out of Oxford. And he had a really interesting and what would seem to be a simple question. What do we talk about all day? What do human beings talk about all day? So he sent his graduate students out into the field with clipboards, and they had already figured out how to codify language. And they went to very common places, the grocery store, to the supermarket, to the movie line, waiting for children and their families waiting for the bus, and they actually, basically, they were eavesdropping. They were listening to what people were talking about.
I want one of these jobs where you go around listening to stories. I love it.
They came back, they collected the information. What did they discover? They discovered that 65% of the time when we're talking informally to people, we are actually telling stories. We are storytelling human beings. That's what we do.
That's amazing.
And as a result of that, what we also have learned is that stories are powerful. We actually remember stories. So when you put that in a business context, it has powerful implications for business.
That's interesting, because when you're saying pictures, we tell stories through pictures and words, then I think points of view is like they realize the power of the picture and the power that, only one word and you can create the story in your head.
Absolutely.
And so it's really amazing that someone else said, you know what, let's tell some stories and get the message across. So when you say that you're one of two people in the United States, what are you doing? You're not listening for stories, are you?
Well, if a client wants me to listen for stories, that's actually something that I will do. But what we are doing is we are working with corporations with our sweet spot tend to be Fortune 1000 companies, but I'm based in New York, so I work with mid-sized firms, and there are very large mid-sized firms in this town, as well as entrepreneurs. I've always been in love with entrepreneurship, having been an entrepreneur myself. So I will work with large and small corporations, and we go in, we have a very formal program. It's called Storytelling for Leaders, and here's how it works. It's a 6-month engagement. When I come into an organization, I love to have a minimum of 8 people in the room, a maximum of 24. With smaller entrepreneurial firms, I will work with 3 or 4 individuals if they're interested in that. And we have very formal training. We teach a workshop, which is called Storytelling for Leaders. It's a pretty intense workshop, goes on for 8 hours in a day. It's a big brain dump, as I call it, and typically people's eyes glaze over about 4 or 4:30.
That's with every workshop, yeah.
It is with every workshop. However, what the people take away from this is they learn how to recognize a story, what a story structure is actually about, how to construct 4 different formats of stories. We teach 4 different formats. One is called a clarity story, a connection story. Also, we teach an influence story and what we call a success story.
I want to find out the difference in all those. But first, I want to say, this is the leadership card, and as you can see, there's all kinds of different hands all together and sort of like a team thing. How does telling stories benefit your leadership skills?
Terrific question. I'm going to share an experience that I had as a young man, and it has to do with leadership. When I was in my 20s, early 30s, I became creative director at a large television station actually here in New York City. I was literally on the job 3 or 4 days, and people would pop into my office. They would say, "Hey, Chris, how's it going? How you doing?" Well, on the 4th day, I picked up the phone, and there was an irate producer screaming at me on the other end, "Where are my materials?" I said, "Jim, I don't know what you're talking about. That's the problem with you people down there. You don't even know what's going on, do you? They were supposed to be here 3 days ago." I said, "Jim, calm down, calm down." He said, "I'm not calm." I said, "They're supposed to go out to the national press yesterday." He said, "I want you to find out what's going on, where they are, and get back to me in an hour." Slam.
Oh, did you even know who Jim was?
I
Oh,
did.
good.
In fact,
All right.
Here's who
Good,
Jim
good.
was. Jim was one of the most powerful producers in our station.
Oh, no.
I was getting beaten up on day number 4 by one of the most
Honeymoon was
powerful.
definitely over,
The
yes.
honeymoon was over big time. And I sat there stunned. I was literally stunned. My jaw dropped. I put the phone down. I went, "My God, what just happened? My God, what just happened?" And I realized, I sat there, I said, "Do you know?" What he did was probably, I realized, give me one of the best lessons I could ever have. He taught me that the buck stops with me as the leader, and that I needed to take ownership of not just the good stuff, but also the bad stuff. And that resonated with me deeply. And I learned early on, thank God, that I needed to know what was going on, and not only that, take ownership of the good and the bad and the in-between. Now, what does that have to do with stories? I wish I had storytelling skills back then to be able to calm him down. I would have used an influence story to actually do that. Stories are one of the great ways that leaders can communicate effectively with their troops, with their stakeholders, with their owners, the people that they work with. And when you look at some of the best leaders in the world, what you discover, Laurie, is that they're awesome storytellers. You look at someone like Steve Jobs, who was a fantastic storyteller. There is another gentleman who I'll point to, who is currently the CEO of Procter & Gamble, P&G. His name is A.G. Lafley. He's a fantastic storyteller. He changed the entire narrative of how Procter & Gamble actually does their innovation. When he came in quite a few years ago, P&G was always known for great innovation, and they had been failing. Some people were questioning, are they really doing a good job? What are they doing? And he changed the entire narrative, the entire story around innovation. What he actually did was he said, we're now going to begin to reach to the outside and bring in innovators, innovative ideas that we can then couple with what we're doing internally. Initially, the P&G research scientists were up in arms.
That's pretty bold,
that's
actually.
Pretty bold.
Yeah.
It's very bold, very bold. But however, by telling the correct story, which came to be known as connect and develop, what he was able to do was to connect brilliant, fresh ideas that came from the outside with his powerful R&D force on the inside to develop really fantastic new products. I believe Febreze is one of them that he came up with, and several others that became multi-billion-dollar products by changing the narrative on innovation. And as a leader, he was able to do that.
Amazing, amazing. And so when you're teaching, when you're taking a group of people, are you teaching them how to actually tell a story, the most effective way to tell a story, or to be creative and come up? Oh, creativity, that was the other one. Creativity, it's like, okay, we're going to find out where that comes into the leadership. It just seems like, okay, you either have that talent or you don't. My goal is to do metaphors. I don't do them well. I can't think of them. I'm so envious of people who do and so appreciative. Can I be taught to tell a story?
Absolutely can be taught to tell a story. In fact, as I mentioned, 65% of the time when we're talking informally, we're doing it anyway. One of the things we do is to change the mindset. When I ask people in the room, please raise your hand. How many people are storytellers in this room? Typically, I'll get 10 to 15% of the people will raise their hands. And then I tell them about the gentleman who I mentioned who discovered that, in fact, we're telling stories informally all the time. And I let them know, and you are all storytellers in this room. You need to start thinking of yourselves that way. And what we're going to do today in our workshop is to take you through several different things. One, how do you recognize a story? How do you identify a story? What are the components of a story? So we have a very formal structure and intellectual property that we go through in our workshop that begin to teach people how to listen differently, how to see differently, how to find stories, collect stories, and then we teach the story structures. It's very interactive, and I guarantee you that if you took my workshop, you would walk out being able to tell a wonderful story. Well,
all right.
That's exactly right, yeah.
So you had mentioned there are 4 types of stories. Can you kind of tell me what the difference is? I'm just working on stories. I just want to tell a story.
That's right. And through the day, we go through these various forms. The first would be called a connection story. If you are a person who is a retail person working in a retail store, and you want to tell them about your new innovative product or perhaps a new vision that your manager has, if you create a connection story, something that is personal to you, but also embeds that new vision or new business information into your experience, and you reach out and tell them about it in a way that makes them feel part of what's happening around them, you are able to connect to them. And so we go through a variety of different steps, how you find the information, how you put it together properly, and how then to express it so that the person who's on the other side says, I like this person. They're connecting to me. And they don't say that obviously in their minds,
right.
But so literally, but they're feeling comfortable with you and feeling that there is a connection between the two of you.
I like that because I think normally I would think, oh, this is very self-indulgent. Who cares about me? You know, this guy came in for a quart or whatever he came in to, came in to buy something. Um, but it's not called, it's connecting. And so it's really all about the person you're trying to do business with in whatever form, rather than being, oh, let me tell you all about me. It's,
And here's another really powerful thing in terms of stories. We have been inundated with 20% faster, 50% brighter, 10% lighter, blah blah blah. It goes in one ear and out the other. We tune out to that stuff. When you take information, business information, and put it into a personal experience, several different things happen. One, and this is a fascinating science behind stories, is that it excites different neural pathways in your brain. When I tell a story that has emotional content, there are a minimum of 6 neural pathways that are ignited in my brain, and in a different part of the brain than where we're having a conversation. In the limbic part of the brain, I won't get too technical here, but here's what happens. Your neural pathways that are lighting up when I tell a story are in the same parts of the brain where I'm telling that story. You are, in a sense, taking ownership of that information as I tell that story. And it's in the part of the brain where belief and trust occur. So if I'm able to impart information to you in an area that is where belief and trust live, you're much more likely to take part in my service or buy my product or feel connected to me, so that there is something that occurs that you will actually, put your money on the table and purchase what I'm interested in having you purchase, assuming that it works for you, assuming that you're interested in it in the beginning. But it's a fascinating way to sell.
it sounds like it's almost obligatory for anybody selling. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that if you could? That's why I want to do metaphors, because it breaks it down and makes it a common ground. If I give you a baseball metaphor and you're a baseball fan, then we know what we're talking about.
That's absolutely right. It makes complete sense. And this is really how I got into this, was through a lot of the science, when I started looking at the science and how powerful a persuader storytelling is. It really is fascinating. A lot of this work was done at Princeton University. There's a gentleman down there, a psychologist by the name of Laurie Lawson. And what he did was he took storytellers and story listeners, he hooked them up to machines that can look at brain waves called functional MRIs. In the fMRI world, you can look at brain waves in real time. And what he discovered was fascinating. He discovered that the story listener's brain waves got in sync with the storyteller's brain waves. The same neural pathways were being ignited.
That's too cool.
It is too cool at the same time. And in a very real sense, the story listeners were taking ownership of that information.
Wow.
Now, the fact that there are 6 neural pathways also means that there are many more opportunities for memory to occur. When we have more neural pathways ignited, more memory occurs. Hence, the fact is that retention of information that's embedded in stories will increase the retention rate by 600 to 700%. 6 to 7 times the retention rate. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, and it just sounds like it's almost essential.
It is almost essential.
It would be crazy not to do it. What's another kind of story? Connector. I got the connector.
You got the connector.
I want to be a connector.
That's right. Another story that we use is a clarity story.
Okay.
Clarity. We live in a very disruptive environment these days. Disruptive technologies surround us on a daily basis. Companies are constantly struggling with this. What the clarity story does, and is used very successfully at a corporate level, is to be able to clarify a new strategy or perhaps a change management initiative, so that when I'm telling you what the new initiative is, again, if I take that information, embed it in a personal experience, tell it as a story, it's much more likely to be understood and to be remembered, so that the troops can actually then initiate the change.
Probably what Procter & Gamble did, too.
That's exactly what they did. And in fact, to go back to P&G for a moment, I really think that that's a perfect example of not just taking leadership, but also taking creativity.
Yeah.
This is how leadership and creativity, one good example of how creativity and leadership
together.
are linked, because he really took the innovation model and flipped it on its head. Instead of simply keeping it on the inside, he decided to take the best of both worlds and to combine them, so that the synergy became, it was 1 and 1 equals 3. It was a much more powerful model that no one really had done in the way that he did it. So that was being very, very creative.
Yeah, okay, great example.
Yeah.
Okay, give me another kind.
So we have the clarity story, and as I said, that's for strategy, and that's for change management initiatives. The influence story. An influence story is a story
That's
that
what you would have used on your boss.
that's what on the producer. It's exactly what I would have
If
used.
you could have, yes.
On my irate producer at that
Yes.
moment would have been the influence story to calm him down and to influence him. It's used in situations where you'll have a recalcitrant individual or group that you want to move along.
Oh, tell
Now,
us what it is,
well,
please.
yeah. So when people are resistant, and we see this in the media all the time, people tend to self-select their media choices these days, and
Yes.
you can find things in the middle, and you can find things in the far extreme left and the far extreme right, and everything in between. And what happens when we're self-selecting, especially in very, I'll call them embedded opinions? If I want to convince you of a new idea, typically what I will do is to give you what I feel is a compelling argument. That's what most human beings will do.
Right.
If you don't agree with that argument, you're not going to be drawn towards it. You're going to be pushed away from it. So what do we typically do?
Or you're going to be lining up defenses to it to prove
That's
you're right
That's
instead
exactly
of the
right.
yeah.
That's
yeah.
exactly right. So you're beginning to put up your defenses. So then I come back with a counter argument. Again, try even harder, and it doesn't pull you closer to me. It does just the opposite.
Yeah.
It pushes you further away.
Right.
The influence story actually works as a pull device because we're giving facts, we're giving information, but by embedding it in a story, it's taking the authoritative tone out of what I'm trying to share with you, and it's giving you choices in a very different way, in a very different part of your brain, to be able to perhaps get more comfortable with the ideas that I'm presenting to you. So, and this has been used from time to time. Will it always work 100% of the time? I can't guarantee that. But what I can tell you is that it's a pull strategy as opposed to a push strategy. So it pulls you closer to me and gives you information in a very different way, in a different part of your brain, that will allow you to perhaps feel more comfortable, not as threatened with the information.
Can you let's take the example of your producer. What you would have told him a story?
I would have. Well, I would have. I've thought about that many times.
I'm sure.
I
Those
would
lessons.
I would
yes.
have told him a story of a success story. Actually, I would have told him a story to influence him, to calm him down, of something that was seemingly awry, that actually had a very successful and happy ending. And in fact,
Okay.
I would have said, Jim, I understand what you're saying. However, I just want to remind you, we have 60 projects that are going on here simultaneously. Occasionally, we'll get a little behind, but let me guarantee you that it will occur. In fact, just the other day, I had a producer come in who had a very similar problem, and we were able to turn that project around in 48
Got it.
hours for her, and it had a very successful, happy ending. So I am going to get to the bottom of your problem, I guarantee you, and it will go out
okay.
post-haste.
Oh, I feel better now. Okay.
By the way, the end of that real story, the real story of what happened when I finally dug down to find out where the heck his stuff was,
Yeah.
which I, 4 days into my job, didn't even know about.
Right.
It actually was in the building. So it did have a happy ending.
Good.
It was in the building. It had been delivered to a different department. It should have gone to his group, but it went to a different group by mistake. So once we tracked it back, he actually had his materials that afternoon.
So you can use that as your next influence story.
That's
All right.
exactly right.
Perfect.
That's exactly right.
What's the last one, the last kind of story?
The last story is a clarity story.
Mm-hmm.
And often clarity stories are used, or no, did we
No,
talk about
we did clarity, right.
Success, I'm sorry, the success
Success,
story.
yeah.
The success story is really a case study, if you will, in terms of something that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and what we're focusing on is what the opportunity or the challenge was to begin with, what the effort was that was used to attack that or to work on that, and then what the outcome was, which was obviously a successful ending.
Those must be the easiest stories, right?
They are the easiest stories. And typically when we work with larger corporations, sometimes they'll want to work on success stories. We say, you guys have lots of white papers or case studies. Bring a couple case studies with you, and let's look at them even before the session. And what we will do is we'll teach you how to take what are sometimes very dry pieces of information. Although they
Right.
talk about success, we reframe that success in a personal anecdote, a personal narrative that then imparts, first it becomes personalized, secondly it becomes emotional, and third it talks about the success. So again, what we're
Rather
doing
than
is
statistics and a chart, and
That's
because
exact-
again, that's
that's
glaze
exact-
over time.
that's
It's like,
exactly
oh yeah,
right.
that's interesting. Pretty color there. That's it. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So let me ask you, and our time is short, but with the Starbucks campaign, that was like, okay, they wanted their customers to interact with their people. What went wrong there? I mean, I love the idea. I salute them for wanting to do that. What was they missing?
What were
Why
they- what-
they
what-
needed you, but what were they missing? It's
What,
like,
what were they missing when they were starting? When they were
when
they
I
were-
mean, it just didn't. It fell flat because I think the employees didn't know how to communicate with the customers or about what, and the customers were going, "What are you doing? Why do I have to talk to you?" What happened there? Was it just?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have a good answer for
Okay.
you. I can speculate. I often go to Starbucks as a third space, and you know the
Yes,
story
yes.
behind that, right? Howard Schultz went to Italy, and he had this aha moment where he actually saw that people in that culture would go and spend social time with their friends and their family. The first space being home, the second space being your office, the third space being where they actually went to socialize. And that was the initial concept, and still is, I believe, behind
Yeah,
Starbucks.
yeah.
Now, it's interesting. I really think that it depends on the Starbucks you go into. There are
I
some.
agree.
There
I
are some
agree.
that are incredibly friendly and engage you. They don't necessarily tell stories, however, they are engaging and happy campers. And then there are others that I feel are there on the treadmill. So if, in fact, there was some effort that went into on a regular basis, because they are the frontline troops,
Sure,
the frontline
yeah.
soldiers, to be able to give them some storytelling skills, that might be something that
I
would
think
be
he's on the
powerful.
right. Yes, I think he's on the right track for sure because people do go there as a home away from home.
Right.
I just think that maybe he needs you to you know, to
Howard,
take.
I hope you're listening.
Yeah, really. You know, to just sort of say, okay, it's cool to have the conversation, but let's you know, put it in a story format and relate to people. Believe it or not, we've got like 45 seconds
Oh my
left.
God.
I know. So I promised you fascinating.
You
This
did?
is fascinating, and we could. No, not you. You're the fascinating.
I'm having a great time.
Good, I am too. So if you want to get in touch with Chris, it's right at the bottom. It's Chris at narrativeiq.com. And from what I hear, you're available for parties, groups, businesses, small businesses, large businesses.
I haven't done any parties
I
yet.
know,
That
that
could
could
be
be fun,
fascinating.
right.
I do know how to juggle, so.
Well, hey, juggle and tell a story. I think you got it.
I think I
That's
do.
the perfect mode for success. I want to thank you so much for taking your time because I know running around the United States as two people must be taking a lot of time. Thank you for being on the Coaching Game.
Oh, thank you
was
so much for
very
having me,
good.
Laurie. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thanks.
Thank you.